Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. This is Firoz Manji from Daraja Press. Our guest today is Kali Akuno. Kali, of course, hardly needs an introduction, but for those of you who've not had the fortune to hear and engage with Kali, let me just say a few words about him. Kali is the co-founder of Cooperation Jackson in Jackson, Mississippi. He's the co-editor of Jackson Rising, The Struggle for Economic Democracy and Black Self-Determination in Jackson, Mississippi, and also co-editor of Jackson Rising Redux, Lessons on Building the Future in the Present. And as many of you will know, we have had the pleasure of interviewing Kali on several occasions here on the Daraja Press podcasts. In our last podcast, Kali discussed the implications of a possible Trump electoral victory, sadly predicting the disastrous outcomes of the US elections, which the Democrats clearly lost almost entirely due to refusing to break with their genocidal policies in Palestine. And now, with the so-called ceasefire in Gaza, recognized more in its breach than its implementation, it's clear that the Trump regime wants to eliminate or remove Palestinians from their homeland. It just occurs to me, Kali, that, maybe they should move Israel to the USA, but then I'd feel sorry for you guys. Anyway, it's clear that the West Bank is already facing what Gaza has faced over the last 15 months. And with the freeing of those involved in the January 6, 2021 insurrection and the assaults on social policy gains that unions and political organizing over the years have fought for in the USA, what are the prospects for the Black movement and the movement of other oppressed groups in the USA? So those are questions that really preoccupies us. And so a warm welcome to you, Kali, to discuss this and many other issues. So let's just start with
Right.
congratulations. You predicted this.
Yeah. Those are not congratulations that are welcomed or warranted. Unfortunately, I been asked this a couple of different times. I just tried my best, knowing American history, to just apply like the sweet sciences I was once heard from some of my elders, the sweet science of dialectics, to read of the situation. And, to me, given the nature of the contradictions, and given the uh, kind of array of forces and what they were organizing, what they were mobilizing for, who they were paying attention to, and who they were ignoring, just very clear that he was going to win this election, which he did. And it was also, to me, as I think we noted, it was very clear why the Democrats were going to lose, at least at the point that me and you did the last conversation. There was one, just Joe Biden's horrible performance in that debate, but also, just Kamala would not move, as you alluded to. She would not move from the genocidal policies and programs that the Biden administration was committed to. And now I think there's been a couple of surveys which clearly demonstrated this point. To the tune what I think 12 million people
Yeah.
who normally vote Democrats, who just stayed home, who chose not to engage, right, and made a very conscious and deliberate decision not to do so. So, you can say to a degree that Trump won by a landslide because he won all of the so-called swing states. But the reality of the situation is just that the neoliberal program just does not speak to the vast majority of people in the United States anymore. It just doesn't. It hasn't been able to produce on the things that they claim that it is supposed to put in place in terms of assuring folks kind of material well-being and benefit. And it hasn't done so since the great crisis of 2008, 2009, which ushered in Biden. So you can't, Obama. So you can't just keep peddling the same snake oil goods and don't think that eventually somebody's going to say that, this stuff just don't work, and I think that was also a critical part of it. But, we picked up a bad virus strain, if you want to call it that, in MAGA 2.0, because that's what in effect that we got. And I can tell your audience and folks, particularly not in the United States, who don't know, this one is not. You hear a lot of pundits say that part of all of these executive orders is shock and awe, and there's a degree of truth in that, no question. But the critical difference this time around, so the first time around, he was just throwing stuff around, hoping it might stick. They are well situated and have been well situated from day one to execute their program. So they have learned. They have their people in place, right? They're very clear about what levers to push. So this is going to be a much, much more effective evil than it was the first time. And we are now contending with a force that knows how to govern. He did not know how to do that the last time. He knows how to do it now. And he's put the right personnel. Don't be, into the audience, don't be confused by the Hegseths and all these people who are being kind of the mouthpieces for some of these departments. It's not what I'm talking about. Some of them probably won't, by the look of Hegseth getting confirmed, probably all of them are going to get confirmed at this point. Maybe one or two rare exceptions. But, those fit a profile of appealing to different constituencies within his coalition, each one of them people, right? The Kennedy, all those different folks. So they're there as figureheads. The more critical piece is all the people he appointed who did not have to be confirmed, but could be placed in as the key managers. They are almost all in place. And they have been issuing orders, cleaning out, eliminating programs, the diversity, equity, and inclusion program, gone, like overnight, and demanding that people who work in any department that might know of any kind of affirmative action program or a redress program, whatever it may be called or disguised, or that they have to basically snitch on each other in order to keep their jobs, right? And that is already occurring. So just off the top, this one is far more effective than the last go around. So it's not just shock and awe, like this what he was doing yesterday is a clear example of promises. What was the tour name, or what the theme that he's on now, probably for the next couple of weeks? Promises made and promises kept. And so far, even some of the ones that I thought that he might have to hold off on, some of the stuff, particularly around immigration, he's doubled down and moved on it. It's creating some profound contradictions, which are all predictable, and that is already beginning to play out in real time. Which are for those who don't know, large aspects of the labor force around food production in the United States is dependent upon migrants and immigrants, like completely dependent upon folks who are in this super exploitable position, which is what enables the United States to have all this excess in food, because the producers are not paying for the labor, right? And don't have to pay for the labor. Well, they're going to have to pay now in order to make sure all the fields in Arizona and Texas and California that are remaining fallow with tons, millions of tons of food that's likely just rotting in the fields because there's no one to pick it. They've already signed demonstrating that in some places 70-80% of workers are not showing up to work, right? To pick the fields, to do the work, to do the animal slaughtering, to do the cleaning out, to do the packaging. Folks are just staying home and staying underground. Their kids are not going to school. That's going to have a ripple effect in affecting the average daily attendance, the ADAs we call it, which impacts how much funding various public schools get, or at least a significant portion of their funding from both state and federal government. So all these promises around him making food and commodities cheaper, the promise of trying to appeal a xenophobic base, white supremacist xenophobic base, are going to drive the cost of food expenditures up tremendously, as well as other critical sectors of the economy. United States, you remember, is a slightly aging country with the number of so-called baby boomers, who make up a disordinate amount of the United States population, just because of the historic kind of demographic boom after World War II. Just a tremendous amount of births for the economy as it was kind of rising due to the tremendous amount of imperialist expansion and extraction the United States was doing to bring all of this kind of material and financial wealth into the United States. That population is now aging and is in desperate need of care. Many of them, I know many of them in my family, my mother and folks like that included, are in that population and need a lot of care. Well, guess what? A lot of the folks who do that care, roughly probably about 50% of some of the kind of the uncertified positions which the health industry works on, also migrants and immigrants. So there are going to be a lot of people who do not receive adequate care, for their elderly mother or their elderly father or their grandmother, their grandfather, who are in, nursing homes or aging in place. It's going to be a lot of people engaging in a lot of immediate suffering soon on account of these policies and programs is going to have a tremendous ripple effect in all of society.
It seems to me, looking at it from the outside, the whole series of policies are being implemented or are going to be implemented that uh, that are, in a sense, self-destructive. I mean, you pointed out what it is in agriculture and in other industries, and that there is this profound contradiction that the policies that are being implemented are going to undermine the capacity of the U.S. economically. And do you see it that way?
In the short term, absolutely, it is going to do that. There's no way around that. However, I'm gonna give you the most morbid and sadistic aspect of their program. This is about reshaping society and bringing it back to norms adjacent to those in the mid 20th century and before. So from their vantage point, look at some of the other moves of what they've been trying to push, and at some degrees been pushing successfully. Who are they going, if they are able to deport 11 to 12 million people, who are they going to get to replace them? There's about 20 million people in prison in this country. Now, they may not have the immediate skill to go out there and work the fields, but could they be forced into new relations of servitude in order to meet certain kind of quotas, but also, most importantly, to reset society, right, back to its kind of antebellum norms? That is where they're going, Feroz. So I think for a section, or I should say, I know for a section of their base, they view this as short-term pain for long-term gain, and the restructuring of the society in many fundamental ways to reset and rebalance, and kind of restore, quote unquote, the natural order of certain people, being designated as toilers and hewers and drawers of wood, etc. And most of them look like me, right? And like you, you know. So they're very don't. Trump clearly is not if he's not following standard economic sense, at least the economic sense, of liberals and neoliberals. He's jettisoning that completely. And he's very clear of what will happen in the short term in terms of the pain. He's very clear on that. He's under no illusions, or they're under no illusions. But what they want to do, and his whole objective is, I'm restating the terms of empire, both internally and externally. And the clearest exposition of his politics that I've heard thus far was really, I would encourage everybody to listen to that Davos speech he gave. That one had some clarity, like real sharpness and clarity. And he basically just issued a threat to the world, straight up. It's either y'all gonna fight or get with the United States program and comply, right, without question, or I can turn all of your countries, or a good significant number of y'all who don't want to fall in line, I can turn your countries into parking lights like we just did in Gaza. So this is not random. It's not happenstance. It's not coincidence. He has some goals and objectives in mind, and this time around, he has positioned himself, at least in the short term, to execute them, for the long-term reorganization of the terms of empire, as he sees it and his forces see it. And we need to be very clear. Trump has no love for, the Bretton Woods world, right? The so-called rules-based order, liberal rules-based order that the United States government and really the ruling class, let's call it what it is, the United States ruling class, that they were able to execute, filling in the vacuum left in part because of the decaying British Empire after World War II, right? The blows, the body blows that the British Empire suffered, between World War I and World War II, and the advances that were being made in technology, in productive capacity, productive yield, that Germany and the United States were able to amass from having, greater land base, better investments in the education system, particularly in Germany at that time, but also in the United States, right? Both of those things were happening, but United States has the advantage, which, clearly, if you listen to what Trump speaks to, United States has an advantage over Europe in that the United States has a ton of oil itself. It doesn't, to a degree, it does not need to extract oil. Right? It doesn't need to. And in fact, it is now producing right now, as we speak, more oil than at any point in history. And that started under the Biden administration. So this is a reset, right? And basically, from his vantage point, the terms that got set up with Bretton Woods, and for those of you who don't know what I mean, in particular by those are the institutions of the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and his last child was the World Trade Organization. So all of these different things were constructed at a conference in was Bretton Woods, Massachusetts, wherein they outlined how the world was going to manage trade and manage global finance in order to avert another crisis that the world experienced of the Great Depression in 29, through most of the 1930s, which led to, part of it was the aggregate, which led to World War II and all of that massive destruction, right? And so this was set up to ensure that there were global mediated flows of capital and goods, within the rule-based order. And then accompanying that, the United States was instrumental in setting up the United Nations and the other kind of rules-based multilateral institutions. And then to ensure their dominance over it, they set up NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Alliance, number one at that time to contain the Soviet quote-unquote threat, but also the rise of the socialist, communist, and anarchist movements that were clearly in the national liberation movements, many of which had those orientations, which were clearly on the rise and could not be stopped at that particular point in time. So how do you contain them? How do you divide them? How do you split them? That's effectively what the latter part of the 20th century really was and played out. And we are living with the consequences, if you will, of both the successes and failures of that plan, of these network of plan that the United States put in place, and the decisions that they made. And so one of the critical things, if you listen into that Davos piece, one of the critical things that he is really trying to do is speed up this contest with China. And from his perspective, to win it. And forcing all the different kind of loosely allied folks who kind of on the fence or, trying to play their interests. And, I can be, like all the countries, which is the majority of saying, well, we can be good with you and we can be good with them, right? Like y'all promoters of free trade. So there should be no problem with us freely trading with whoever we want to. But again, he's trying to reset the terms. Like, no, you're going to keep everything in a denomination of dollars as the international currency, right? You will not be able to trade in your own currency. You will not be able to mediate exchanges, based on, exchangeable rates. The petrodollar is going to remain. So the whole piece around Saudi Arabia and OPEC, have to bring the rate, raise up production and bring the cost down. And he said very clearly, that's what I'm saying. Him saying in that speech that the war in Ukraine is in part being funded by the high price of oil, and that was continuing to fuel Russia's coffers. Now that's not a lie, right? And so that one was the clearest kind of shot across the bow to Putin I've ever heard him articulate at any point in time. So, it's not only are we seeing kind of this reset, I think you're seeing a Trump who's far more confident in himself and what he wants to do, and now knows how to do that. He can't get played in the same way that I would argue Putin played him, kind of the last time. And folks are thinking like, okay, he likes all of these fascists. It's not that he likes a bunch of fascists. He is a fascist. That's what he is. So he's just admiring their ability to execute their programs in a way that he feels hampered by the United States Constitution and the so-called checks and balances in the trifold orientation of government. And there's still a number of contradictions there, but basically, at least, assuming, and let's assume, this is not my position, just to be clear, but let's assume that there will be elections in 2 years. So he's got, and more unlikely as a result of this short-term program, the Republicans will, under normal circumstances, they will lose the House and the Senate. I don't think he's going to allow that to happen. I don't think there will be another round of elections, and those folks, thinking that this is somehow far-fetched, I would encourage you to let go of your own version of American exceptionalism that's in your head and recognize that this is, kangaroo states or banana republic that the United States forced on the rest of the world. It could easily force on its own population, right? You just got to get rid of some aspects of American exceptionalism out your head. And if nothing, look at clearly what the last basically 8 years has taught us, right? Like this is the rules of the game are not being played by any normal circumstances of what grew to understand the United States to be and how it functioned. That order has already fundamentally been shattered and adjusted, and he's going to keep pushing that needle. And right now, at least in the short term, Most of the things he wants to execute, the Supreme Court will back and validate. In fact, they are, you got folks like Clarence Thomas, who is asking folks in social movements, right-wing social movements, if you want to call them that, he's asking them to, y'all create cases, bring them to us so that we can reshape society through the courts in a way that we can totally bypass Congress and his deadlock and not being able to do so. So he's already stated, even before Trump, was get me some cases that will end, right, gay marriage. Send them to me. I need them now, right? Send me some cases that will totally destroy environmental protection, rights. He's openly out there saying, send us cases. They can fail at the state level. They can fail at the state federal level. They just need to get to us. Get them to me as soon as possible, and we'll take care of all the problems that our billionaire handlers want eliminated. And if you think I'm lying, just look at what he said. Go back and look at what he said. In the summer, in the beginning of spring, that turned the president into an emperor, because that's affect what they did. Clearly anticipating Trump was going to win, or wanting and hoping for him to win it, and kind of orchestrating for him to win. But they very clearly, just have made a Napoleon-like figure out of Donald Trump, right? That is what we have. And remember, technically Napoleon came into power through democratic processes and means before he declared himself emperor, right? So there are parallels for what we are experiencing in history that I think we just got to uncover or revisit and not lie to ourselves about what we see taking place right before our eyes. Now,
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just about to jump to one of the key pieces is, you can hear a lot of doom and gloom in what I'm saying, and undoubtedly, it is not ideal. It's not ideal conditions at all. But I stress to everybody that what he is putting in motion and what the forces allied with him are putting in motion are a tremendous amount of contradictions that can be exploited. We just have to be very clear-eyed. We have to be very courageous, and we have to do our best to tap in to all those who are going to be suffering as a result of the policies and programs that they put in place, with some clear and sound arguments and some clearly articulated and demonstrable alternatives as to where things could go and what different outcomes could occur. And I think, the contradictions that he had laid bare, we need to exploit them to the hilt, because they point towards the construction of a new world. And all of this is taking place, we got to recall, because the capitalist world system is in deep crisis. And this is a reshuffling on a global scale of, for them to restore social order, which they need in order to make the type of profits and assist the level of social control that they felt that they had in the 19th and the early part of the 20th century. Because that is what they're aiming to go back to, that level of quote unquote prosperity. But also, the level of control when all of us, black and brown people, all of us darkies knew our place, and women knew their place, and queer folks and trans folks were not visible, right? They were buried deep off in the closets, or their home were deeply repressed, right? That is what they're going to, and why he's articulating to the world, right? Again, on that Davos speech, he went and told the world that there's only two genders. When most of our traditional and indigenous cultures, they never operated with nothing that binary in history, nowhere on the planet. So that was, don't just take it as like, I want everybody to be clear. That was a imposition. That was, I'm telling you what you can and cannot do, and what you cannot be on a global scale, which do not correspond to the vast majority of our histories and cultures in any era in history. But he's saying, I'm going to impose this. And if you don't think that that is a critical piece, just pay attention to what the evangelical right has been able to do, particularly in the African continent, the last 10 years, right? Where there are laws now set in place in Kenya
And in
and
Israel.
and yeah, look at what they've been doing. So, this is a step, and just a more concrete piece to the step. And what I want everybody to be clear is that there's a profound degree of opportunity that are going to emerge, from all of these different things that put in place. And so this could be a golden era of resistance and alternatives if we choose to seize them, if we come out of our fear, if we come out of our awe, if we come out of our shock. This is going to be a tremendous amount of experimentation, because there's going to be millions of people who will be willing to try things that they normally would not do or would not even conceive of, because necessity is going to demand it. So
Well,
just
that's a
let's go
point.
back. We start. Go ahead. No, go
No,
ahead.
no, that's a point I want to raise. I mean, it seems to me from what you've described that the Trump regime has taken the subtitle of your last book to be their own lessons on building the future in the present. Uh, and I really think that is exactly what is being done. I think you've
Yeah.
articulated it very well. But I'd like to sort of turn back, okay, to the last point. Okay, what are the lessons of building the future in the present for us? What is the possibilities? Where are the contradictions? What specifically? I would particularly like to talk to you about your own experiences of nurturing and creating mutual aid, of nurturing and creating alternative forms of production, of alternate forms of collective organizing, and so on. What I mean, has that disappeared? Surely not.
Oh, no, no.
There's been a huge amount going across the USA, and so I'm wanting to get an idea of what are the possibilities, where are the the cracks that will let the light in, um, what are the center of hope that we need to build in this coming period.
Yeah. Let me say this unequivocally. There are a plethora of examples all around folks in the United States, and arguably where you are in Canada, right? You know, uh, and some of the most critical lessons we have to look to are some of the folks who have had to survive under the boot of the system, even before these right wing forces it came into power. So, some of the most critical lessons that we can learn actually come from a lot of the migrant communities that exist in like the United States and Canada, right? Because they've had to learn how to live underneath the radar without access to a lot of the resources and recourses that people, who are citizens, quote unquote, who have papers, who have the legal opportunity to seek and have gainful employment. They have to work around that, and they require folks to be in deep solidarity with each other to make it, because they can't just go, work a regular 9 to 5 and get paid. They can't even go do banking in large parts of the United States, to protect or store or save their wages. So they have to figure out all these kind of alternative systems. And believe me, they exist in almost every single community city that you could think of, where folks have in place. So we have an example, right? There's millions of these local examples of folks finding a way and creating a way out of no way to make it. Right now is the time to make those things visible and to make them aggregate to anybody who wants to be in solidarity with them. That's my argument, right? Now let's move it also beyond. If you look at what's taking place in Southern California, particularly around the LA with these fires, it's horrendous, right? And in large part, I'm a Southern California boy. I'm an LA boy originally. That's where I was born, primarily raised there. And, it's one of these things, we have to, number one, get better at actually understanding and working with the ecologies and what they're set up to do. right? Because the LA, even though I grew up there and have an intense love-hate relationship with the place, it's one of those places where I left because I'm like, the way this is set up is unsustainable. It is completely unsustainable. LA has to rob, just LA alone, right? And not just California. It has to rob water from other states, Colorado River and up north to feed that because it's not sustainable. And the nature by which, they tried to engineer in the early part of the 20th century, engineer things like the LA River actually destroyed the river. And then building in places where, nature clearly articulated, I wouldn't do that if I were you. You're going to hurt the soil quality. You're going to disrupt flows. That's all kind of coming back to bear. So you need to rebuild, I think, I think the critical lessons we're going to have to apply is how to work within the ecological limits that exist. So that requires, number one, not denying climate change and other aspects of ecological collapse and rebuilding in a totally different way. Now that's kind of a warning I want to put out because that's something I think we might come back to. But the point here, the positive point here, the mutual aid that is taking place in all throughout Los Angeles, particularly in Black and Latino communities, is tremendous for Rose. I mean, being in some dialogue and communication with folks, trying to share lessons that, at least for me, I would say learn primarily doing in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, trying to share all that and bring it all in. Where we started, say 20 years ago, and this is the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina and the Great Flood, like 2025. So, where I see the movement in a broad sense, like they were calling me, some of the folks, particularly one group over in the Valley was calling and was saying, we want your perspective. And we've done X, Y, and Z, bam, bam, bam. They went and laid out. And I said, you don't need to call. Y'all didn't need to call me because, it took us about 2 years to figure out what y'all implemented in 2 weeks. Right? Because that's how well I think the movement has gained in terms of some of the skills and the transfer of knowledge, right? In a very horizontal way. Like you can just see that growth and folks moving into place and into position, not waiting for the government to do things, not anticipating or expecting them to show up, and just setting up things for people to need. Now, that explosion, that knowledge, we've seen it on a massive scale. Just 5 years ago, if you want to say 4 years ago, with the pandemic. There was a massive explosion of mutual aid in the United States, and from what I understand, around the world, where folks were protecting and taking care of each other and building and connecting in ways that were outside of the parameters of the normal, rules of engagement within the capitalist system. So you saw, farmers, we saw in the United States, farmers bypassing the normal kind of supply chain routes and setting up direct distribution sites or bringing food directly into the communities and taking them to pantries or the small, groups that were set up, setting up some distribution networks spontaneously, relatively spontaneously. That is continuing. It just happened recently in parts of North Carolina and Florida after some of these hurricanes. So the skill is out there for us. That's the point, right? And I think there's more of a consciousness and an understanding that has emerged, I would say, over these last 20 years about what we kind of have to do for ourselves when there's system collapse. And I think folks are seeing more and more that, be it a tornado, be it a hurricane, be it fires, be it floods, all of these as a result of the climate crisis are becoming more commonplace and more acute. And people are now, having their head to both be ready and prepared, but to just go out and be willing to engage. Our challenge, I think, in this next period is moving beyond the crisis response in terms of like these immediate destructive piece and organizing it at the level of the systemic crisis response of how do we take care of our communities when they're going to be acute shortages. And how do we plan in such a way to overcome these shortages that we know that now that we can anticipate? So some of them we know we can anticipate because of weather, but some of them now we know we can anticipate because of the policies and programs that I described. So if you know that the price of eggs is not likely to come down in the United States anytime soon, you begin to start having to articulate, well, we have to do some things to shift that ourselves to make sure we have the proteins and nutrients that we need to survive and can afford. And so what you're going to, I think you're starting to see, and not just wild white supremacist preppers and all that other kind of stuff, because that exists in ample degree. But I think you're going to see a more progressive leaning, more radical leaning orientation of folks stepping into, hey, we got to turn all available space into farms or in other productive capacity. And one of the things, like, Cooperation Jackson that we came out with from the summer, kind of a mass line that accompanies some of the mutual aid experience and alternative system experience that we're trying to hone in on and expand, is this phrase, every yard a farm and every garage a factory, right? And trying to get people to understand themselves and what resources they have and the skills they have to put them in use to meet not only their own needs, but the needs of the community. And to think about, I may not have the soil to grow good cabbage, but I could perhaps grow potatoes. So let me come up and be in a mediated relationship with other, small producers in my community. You grow corn, I grow potatoes, and we'll trade what we need. So there's a way here that I've been arguing, as you know, for years, that this crisis is forcing us to do some things in an alternative way. We have to, it is our challenge to combine these and coordinate these through broad democratic means of planning and communication, that we can meet our basic needs. I think what Trump is unleashing, at least in the United States, is going to force more communities to take this actual step of increasing production, but also people are going to start organically figuring out how to plan this out to meet basic needs. So I think we potentially, like, again, if we can get past some of the fear, if we can get past some of the shock, get past some of the awe, we are on the cusp of being able to do the build part of what we call the Build Fight program. We're on the cusp of that, stepping up from touching, a couple of million people to tens of millions of people in a very short order. Then the challenge is going to be politicizing it. So that is the weakness at this point, to a degree, I would argue. Right, the broad kind of democratic, hey, everybody's in need, everybody should be able to get all the resources we have. That level of kind of organic consciousness is out there. The piece I'm talking about is, hey, let's sustain this, and what do we need to do to sustain it, right? And not just have to revert back to, well, once the system, gets its workers back, or they figure out what we won't produce for ourselves, we'll just go back to relying upon, the normal food chains and all of the systems of exploitation that were there. So that's where the political consciousness is saying, no, we don't want to go back to that, right? We're going to do something different and new. And hopefully, this, what you were talking about, I'd hope that despite all the challenges that we have from being, under-resourced, under-capitalized, which is what, Cooperation Jackson struggles with. There's lessons around how we overcome that, right? But we are still limited to scale. That is, but I think we can demonstrate, you look at things that we've been putting in place, like the really, really free market, the enhanced food production, that these things can happen and occur, with some planning, some will, and determination. But we, like in Jackson, we are now, I think, on the cusp of just moving from doing a small level of food security, right, in West Jackson, to moving towards our overall objective of food sovereignty. Why? Because as the prices go up and there's more and more shortages, we're going to find that more people are going to have to resort to their own means of securing their future and utilizing all the yard space and all the stuff that exists in Jackson to start doing production. Now, we are going to try to, play a role in like, our limited forces can only produce but so much, but we can train people how to farm. We can provide, a certain amount of seeds from what we've been growing and storing, and set people up and setting up systems. So, there's an active role that I think, what I'm trying to highlight from our direct experience, there's an active role that different groups can play and expanding us out and getting people to engage in this next period. And that's going to be essential, I would argue, the next 4 months, particularly in February, when some of the tariffs start to kick in, that will make the deportation even more impactful and spike prices even more. So if they follow through, if he truly follows through with hitting Canada and Mexico with some serious tariffs, the costs in the United States are going to rise significantly. And I think once that kicks in, folks are going to have to get in motion, both with demanding, that the program switch and the policies switch. But when he doesn't cave or fold to that, then going to have to implement, well, what do we need to do to take care of ourselves? And it's for anybody who's listened to this interview, to our dialogue, to be a conscious agent in facilitating folks communicating and planning each other in democratic ways. To, again, I must cite that mass line, and the critical piece in this next round is getting people to understand to utilize all their resources, every yard or farm, every garage or factory, right? And that's just a shorthand of saying we are going to have to expand our own productive capacities to meet our individual needs and our collective needs, but with a clear eye to the collective. And why? This gets into another point that you had kind of raised, you raised before. Look, if we don't figure out how to increase kind of like food production in short order, it's going to be a tremendous breeding ground for chaos and mayhem. And that will do nothing but aggravate and accelerate the kind of the drive towards civil war that this society, I've argued, has been on for most of the last 25 years. So, if you got to start worried about your neighbor coming over to your food garden and stealing things, as opposed to coordinate with your neighbor production and head them out, right? If you coordinate and plan and do things together, you have one outcome. If you're constantly worried about somebody coming and stealing, you're going to have another outcome. And we need to accentuate the first in order to negate the second.
On a final point, let me just the U.S. is the most heavily armed society in the world, and
By
I've
far.
heard from sort of progressives in Colorado saying they are being forced to take up arms because they are being faced by the threat of these armed thugs from the right wing. Are we seeing that building up into a form of madness, of a civil war where there is going to be the use of these arms?
Sadly, yes. But the problem I want folks to understand is that the left-leaning and left-oriented forces are so late to the game. The right is already armed to the teeth, Feroz, completely armed to the teeth. And a good number of them are trained. So it's not just, like if you have arms but you don't know how to use them, you really don't have nothing, right? At the end of the day. They've been training for decades. Did recently looking for some materials just yesterday, in fact, and wind up going to Army supply store. Totally different vibe there than it was a couple of months ago. The mentality of the folks in the store, right? And all the people who work at these particular stores, most of these kind of gun stores and armory supply stores, army surplus stores and stuff, they're already wild, crazy ass preppers anyway. But now they are emboldened, and I saw some signs, up that in Louisiana and Mississippi, there are laws that are being put forward to have folks become bounty hunters and legalizing that. for more of them to become that. And both of those laws in Louisiana and Mississippi, those are two I know most directly about. This is just some knowledge I've been came across from studying our legislature in the last couple of days, and some of our members bringing this up. They're going to pass easily. And they're not just going to be looking for, migrants, immigrants, right? They're going to be deputized to track down people who are providing healthcare support in the form of abortion, or healthcare support in the form of folks providing hormones, right? For folks who are going through hormonal, treatment, hormonal therapy, right? And either to produce more estrogen or to produce more testosterone. Either way, for folks who are making that transition where this is becoming illegal, and there are communities which are learning how to produce those things so that people can continue to be themselves. All that's going to be criminalized, and these folks are being deputized to be hunters, right? That's what's happening. So this is, and I'm not speaking speculative. I want folks to understand there's no speculation about or about what I'm saying. This is what is actually being done, and where the right is. So yes, I'm gonna say unequivocally, I'm glad that the forces you talk to in Colorado are coming to this conclusion, and I want to encourage them to go deep and quick as fast as they can in learning how to get themselves prepared. Now, this is my element of this is about purely self-defense, because we need to understand we are not going to outgun these folks. Just be clear about that. You're not going to outgun these folks, right? You're 20 years too late, 30, 40 years too late. And they've deeply infiltrated these ultra right-wing forces, these fascist forces. They've deeply infiltrated the armed forces. Just read the FBI reports and the own Army reports about, the confidence they have in their own troops, right? And what type of recruiting that's been going on. And then if you look at it very clearly, the Oath Keepers were oriented and built to take people who had military training or who were part of law enforcement and to make them part of their ranks. And they've been very successful at that. And Trump letting these folks out, exonerating, 95% of the folks who the January 6ers, if they called themselves, he sent a clear message to us and to the world. I got my brown shirts now, and I'm going to protect them. And I'm going to put them on the streets to enforce my vision, my program.
But
So
they've always had their blue shirts anyway.
But blue shirts in black communities that will force a certain degree of terror that's just built into our social consciousness from the last 400 years of being over here. But for a lot of white communities, you need something extra, right? Because they view, most, particularly quote unquote middle class, I hate that term, but particularly middle class white folks, they view the police as protectors, right? Yeah. And that should they call, their needs will be serviced, as opposed to if I make that call, I'm not sure they're going to take me out. I got to think twice about making the call if my life is under duress, right? It's a different consciousness, a different orientation. And if you want to strike fear in the hearts of people, like some white liberals or progressives, you don't do that necessarily off the top of police. You do that with bruisers and enforcers. Yeah. So, and then in Mississippi, like we say, for the last like 40, 50 years, they don't really need the Klan. They already got the police. The police are the Klan, right? That you don't really need that. But now, that's not true. That's not uniform every place. And they also need folks who are willing to do some things that the police are not willing to do. But I think this is one critical piece I want folks to understand for why in a particular brown shirts are needed. You got to do something with a group of young, angry men who you cannot employ. Think about that.
Yeah.
Think about that, because this goes back to the deep crisis of what I'm talking about, right? That I grew up with, growing up in LA, right? And let me put it to you this way: it's one of the things I've had to think long and hard about, and I think you've heard me tell this story about, once I set up the School of Social Justice and Community Development a couple of days before it opened, had a serious crisis, just one of the worst nightmares I ever had. Like, wait a minute, I didn't set these kids up. We producing in school, but there ain't no jobs for them. So what am I setting them up to do? Right? I'm just setting up for frustration, because there's nothing that corresponds in the world that's going to. I'm it's one of the points you realize I'm preparing you for the. This was 2001, 2002, 2003 when we had the School of Social Justice Community Development in Oakland. But it was just realization, like, I'm preparing you for the 20th century. I'm not preparing you for the 21st. And none of this education system that we got set up is prepared to meet what's coming. Right? And you see it now. Like this quote, Trump and them, his forces, there's a race to AI, but the clear part of the race to AI is to make sure that we don't, there comes a point in time where we don't need black and brown folks around to do menial tasks, because the computers are doing for us. So what we need you around for, right? So there's an element of this. If you listen to like Elon Musk, his what some people are calling the the de facto commander in chief, he's got a worldview. Him and Zuckerberg and some of these other folks, they have a worldview which is premised on there being 6 billion less people in the world.
Yeah.
So that's what they're preparing for. And you need these kind of brown shirts to execute these mass programs of genocide, when those who been oriented in the main around the order as it is may have some reluctance, may not be reliable, may not pull the trigger as easily, right? So you need this kind of extrajudicial force to set new terms. Again, going back to that point, to set new terms. And that's exactly what he's intending to do with them. Now, I'm using the brown shirts very deliberately, because we got to remember what happened to them, right? The Nazis used them to create shock and awe, but the second they got into power, the first group that they eliminated was them. So that likely
also, I mean, one looks at how the Israelis have been operating, is to let go these thugs and let them do their bidding, and then they legalize and normalize what has been done. And I think there are lessons there. And that brings me, I mean, I think we're coming up to an hour and we will need to conclude this. But I would like to have a discussion with you again sometime soon to talk about what are we learning from the slaughter and killings that are happening under the U.S. Support across internationally, and how will that manifest itself within the USA. So perhaps that'll be a topic for a future conversation.
It has to be. It has to be. I'll end, I think, with this, just because of the matter of time. The president in Colombia made, I think, the clearest articulation of understanding what took place in Gaza. And he said, I'm paraphrasing, this was to teach us all a lesson.
Yeah.
And to put us in our place. That is what, what Biden and the U.S. ruling class wanted to demonstrate to the world and to all of their would-be challengers. Y'all might make, more toys and clothes and computers and cars than we do, but we are still the most destructive force that has ever existed on the planet. And we don't have no gumption about using it when and where we have to. That was the lesson.
Yeah, indeed. Well, Kali Akuno, once again, really appreciate you giving us time. I know how much pressure you are under and so many things going on. But really, I think it's been very valuable having this discussion. And I look forward to further conversations, perhaps after you return from Cabo Verde.
Going to learn some lessons from there.
Indeed.
Oh, yeah, let's do that for sure.
Yeah. Okay, you take care and give my greetings to everyone at Corporation Jackson.
Will do. Thank you, Feroz.
Okay, I'm going to end the streaming now, and then if you hang on because we need your computer to upload
Great.
the data. So I'm just ending the